USPSA recently changed the rules to allow up to 59 ounces in production and carry optics divisions. So today we're talking about adding weight to your gun or heavyweight guns versus lightweight guns. Are you ready? Stand by. Thanks for tuning in. No big lead in here today, guys, but if you like what I'm doing with the channel, this type of video and others like it, please consider liking and subscribing. There's about an 80% chance you're not subscribed to the channel. And if you want to take this relationship to the next level, maybe check out the links in the description. And here's your first chance to comment. Have you messed with the weight in your gun since the rule change went into effect? Let me know in the comments. And if you are a Glock guy and you want to build your very own heavyweight Glock, then check out the link to my Patreon post where I link all of the parts that I used in this video, as well as a discount code that can save you some money. So the premise is simple. There's a lot of tropes going around online that heavier guns are better, but lightweight guns transition better and are faster. So I wanted to test this, and I realized that it would have been maybe better to be able to get a 59 ounce version of a gun and a 20 ounce version of that same gun. It's really hard to make a Glock that heavy, but what I could do is make a Glock in carry optics trim away from about 30 ounces, as you see here on my left, up to about 38 ounces, as you see here on my right. While I could test a gun like the CZC A01 versus just my regular lightweight Glock, that wouldn't be as good because there's so much different about the gun. So I'm increasing the weight of the gun about 25% at the end of the day, which is significant, and I think the results actually do start to stratify. So I tested the gun in 5 ways. The first was 2 at 25, where I drew the gun from the holster and fired 2 shots at a USPSA target at 25 yards. I fired the doubles drill, where you're firing pairs of shots based on one sight picture at a USPSA target at 10 yards, and you see how close you can hold the group, hopefully the size of your palm or less. I used the Mantis X10 Elite to measure the recoil meter to look at the angle of muzzle climb to see if there was any change there. And I tested transitions on a Blake drill, that's 3 open USPSA targets at 10 yards, trying to shoot them as fast as you can. And then I did hard transitions with an 8-inch steel plate pair at about 10 to 12 yards on about 30 to 40 degree transitions. Now in the first set of tests, I really got lost in the weeds and got progressively heavier, testing everything from a OEM Glock to a stainless steel guide rod of 15 pounds, to the extended tungsten guide rod, which adds about 1.5 ounces to the gun, to the pure tungsten guide rod, which adds about 2.5 ounces to the gun, to the pure tungsten guide rod with a thug plug, to the pure tungsten guide rod with the thug plug and a brass extension. So as you can see in the video, there wasn't a tremendous difference with how I ran the gun. My draw and splits were basically identical. And what I can tell you is that the heavyweight guns felt more in control, and if you look at the hits at the end, you'll see that the hits were a little bit better with the heavyweight guns. However, the DPM recoil system actually behaves very much like a heavyweight gun, and I really like how it looked at the 25-yard targets. And at the 25-yard line, I certainly felt more comfortable using the heaviest configuration of the gun. It just felt way more stable. It felt like it settled out of recoil faster, and I got a steadier sight picture. So I definitely preferred the heavier configuration at the 25-yard line. So next we did the doubles drill, which the procedure is real simple. You just take one sight picture, then run the trigger twice. And what I found was interesting. While the heavier guns did feel more stable in recoil, what seemed to matter more was the balance of the gun. The heavyweight version of the gun has all this extra weight in the grip to counteract all this weight in the muzzle that it's putting in, and it was the best. It held the tightest group by a pretty good margin. Probably the next most successful group was the stainless steel guide rod with the 15-pound spring. As far as actually recoiling and holding a tighter group, it did really well. But realize right now that with the spring rate and how fast I'm running the trigger, you're essentially tuning a gun to an individual shooter. So the heaviest gun works for me better at the 10-yard line with rapid double taps. And as far as the actual recoil meter, you can see here the procedure, which is just fire 5 shots and let the recoil meter do its thing. If you look at the data which I'm putting on the screen now, you can see that the angle of muzzle climb reduced as the weight in the pistol increased to a certain point. Now, whether that's usable or not, I don't know, but it was an interesting data point. I was curious if the heavier weight guide rods did in fact pull the muzzle down, and they appear to do exactly that. What is interesting is the weight in the grip didn't necessarily affect the muzzle rise very much. Now on the next test with transition, I decided just to test the extremes, to take the heaviest configuration and the lightest configuration and just have them face off. So on the Blake drill, there wasn't any real big differences in time. The draws and the transitions, the way that I was running the gun stayed the same regardless of which gun that I was using. And like a knucklehead, I didn't record my hits, but I do remember what the scores kind of were that day, and I can tell you that the heavyweight gun performed better. And the issue I was having with the lightweight gun was on the middle target. When I was driving it in recoil off the first target, I would generally over transition past the alpha zone and shoot Charlies and Deltas when I was going at that speed. While the heavier gun does take more effort to get it moving, it seems to be easier to stop on a point than the lighter weight gun. I had a hard time being more precise with the lightweight gun. And similarly, moving on to the transitions drill, again, the times were identical. The heavyweight gun and the light gun came out of the holster at the same speed. I was able to transition them at the same speed, but I connected more on the steel plate when I was going at that pace with the heavy gun than I did on the lightweight gun. Now, I realize that all of this testing, which is more than I've seen on YouTube previously, now I fully realize that this testing is flawed, but it is some data that wasn't out there previously, so maybe you can use it to draw conclusions about your gun. What I can tell you is that I ended up keeping the heavyweight trim gun, and that was at the expense of using the large backstrap. I prefer the feel of the gun with the large backstrap, but testing the gun with the brass grip insert against just using the large backstrap, I was able to hold tighter groups when I ran the trigger quickly. So I ended up keeping this as my #1 match gun, which is the heaviest gun that I have. I'm not necessarily going to say heavier guns are better, but I can tell you that I prefer them. I think that something in the mid-30s up to the low 40s is probably an ideal weight for me. But again, I'm a different physique from what you may be, so my preference may not be your preference. But it is something you can play around with. And if you want to go whole hog, you can get the brass extensions, thug plug, and the big heavy tungsten guide rod. But if you don't have that kind of cash, or you shoot IDPA or production division, just using the stainless steel guide rod with a reduced power spring seemed to improve the performance of the gun as well. So you can do that and hopefully get some more performance as well. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks, guys.